What is going on, everybody? It is Mark Cardula, lead faculty and CEO here at Modern Pain Care, where we make you the complete clinician. Coming at you today with an episode that was spurred by one of our coaching clinician, I guess you could say clients, but one of our clinicians in our coaching program who talked about how do you get patient buy-in? How do you get patients to buy in? And then the discussion turned to, what some people always talk about, unmotivated patients, and which can be a delicate topic. When Jared and I discussed the title of this episode, we were like, oh boy, be careful, because we have a lot of friends in the patient world, the patient advocacy world, and understand some of the titles that get thrown at patients that aren't always all that good. As far as unmotivated patients, sometimes that's a major disconnect with the clinician versus some issue with the patient. Now, there can be some patient issues, don't get us wrong. Nobody's perfect. But before we get deeper into that topic, let's see how our co-host is doing. How are you doing today, Jared Hall?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. Don't tell anybody, but today is actually my 8th wedding anniversary, and I decided to start it off by spending some time on the podcast with you and with all of our wonderful listeners. But luckily, it's early, and my wife she's not necessarily a morning person, so we'll be all done by the time she gets up and gets ready to roll.
That is a wise move and somewhat dangerous of an opportunity this morning, and I feel just lucky that you're hanging out with me on such an important day in the Hall household. But congratulations to you guys. How many years?
8 years. 8 years today.
Awesome. Very
Of
congratulations.
marriage, and 2 years before that. So we're at the 10-year mark.
Wow, decade of a relationship and going strong. Good deal. Good deal. So let's get into the topic, man. As much as I'd love to talk about your marriage, your wife's a very pleasant woman, and she cooks some amazing cookies too. By the way, if you guys ever get a chance to hang out at the Hall household, definitely don't forget to reach into the cookie jar for sure. But anyway, unmotivated patients. I'm not a big fan of the word personally. I know you and I talked about it before we recorded this. What are your thoughts around that kind of term? And again, it comes off of this discussion of patient buy-in and prescribing exercise. Well, what do you do with these patients that just aren't doing it? Like, just aren't feeling like exercise is what they're not complying, they're non-compliant. So what are your thoughts around that whole unmotivated patient discussion, Jared?
I mean, I have a lot of a lot of thoughts that come up, and you know, what I used to think was, oh well, these patients just don't care. They just don't want to do exercise. They don't want to move. They're just here because somebody told them to come or whatever, right? This person, well, this is the reason that you're not getting any better, and this is the reason that you hurt. It's just because you're so unmotivated, right? But then over the years, as I worked with more people, as I learned a little bit more, as I realized how little I actually knew, I started to recognize maybe a lot of that unmotivation or disengagement or whatever that I saw with patients was actually probably coming from me. And a lot of it was probably because I hadn't taken the time to communicate or connect with that patient well. Maybe I hadn't taken the time to hear their story. Maybe I hadn't taken the time to really hear what their concerns were, what their goals are. And maybe I was trying to squeeze them into my hyper specific, medicalized exercise box. And that just wasn't really engaging for them. That wasn't something that they were interested in at all. And that's not their problem. That's any human being doesn't want to be forced to do something that they don't enjoy or that they don't see any value in. So I started to recognize that maybe I was a big problem in that whole, quote unquote, unmotivated patient scenario, and that I needed to maybe reevaluate myself in that relationship and in that interaction, and see how I could go about things in a more patient-centered way to maybe help people understand and join together on maybe a plan or a program that was more appropriate or realistic or palatable to them.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. As far as sometimes it's a lot more about us than it is about the patient. I think definitely in my journey as a clinician, there's this insecurity we all have. We're like, God, I don't want to be wrong. I want to be a good clinician. I don't want to, be this person that's not getting everyone better. So we can become very insecure to the point where anything that goes wrong, it's not my fault, it's their fault, it's the patient. That can't be me. I'm a clinician who's learned all these great things. And again, there can be different times where different issues are at play. But think oftentimes when you don't recognize, when you're living in your like clinical bubble of, and right now, which I think is overall a good movement, there's this push to like get people, loading and deadlifting and different things, which again, overall, I think the message is a good one and a direction we should go, but that is not every patient that enters your clinic. So not my clinic. I mean, I definitely have gotten more people moving and loading in the past probably 5 years than I have, in the, 10 years or so after, my career before that, just because of the research and different things. But you can't just assume everybody's in your world as a clinician of what your latest continuing education course you took or whatever your bias. Maybe you're coming from a athletic training or a exercise scientist or personal training background as you go into PT school and become a clinician. I mean, we're all going to have our biases, but there are biases. They're not the patient's biases, and that's where I do think we tend to try to pull people. And I think in what we push for our folks in our coaching program is just own your biases, just own them, know what you come into the clinical equation with as far as what you're bringing in as far, oh yeah, I do have a tendency to want to get people throwing around trap bars and deadlifts and which again, for your client in front of you might be perfect, might match them perfectly, or it might be something they're willing to try and nudge toward, but never make that assumption. And I think sometimes that becomes clinician-centered care of like, I know that all these things that we need to load, the latest Instagram post says I need to, so therefore that's what I'm going to push on you, patient, where that might not resonate with the patient. So what are the things in your mind, Jared, could we do better as clinicians to kind of tailor our exercise and even our treatments, maybe not just exercise, but to make it truly person-centered? Because I think sometimes we get in that clinician-centered, this is what my latest RCT says, which again is important, evidence is important. Definitely that your clinical experience is important, but there are that patient values piece that sometimes, gets less or more clout in the equation. But what in your mind is ways that we can maybe better tailor so we don't have these situations where patients are maybe incorrectly being labeled unmotivated? What do you think we can do better in that regard?
I mean, two things come to my mind immediately that are like foundational from a patient interview, like a subjective examination or whatever you want to call it. I like to call it a patient interview. Um, and one of those is I feel like on average, we're really, really not good at figuring out patient expectations, like directly asking people about it. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you expect from physical therapy? What do you expect that rehab is going to look like? What do you expect your outcome is going to be? Just asking actual direct questions about expectations for the process so you can know where that patient truly stands. And then number two is I don't feel like on average we do a really good job of examining people's exercise history or movement history, right? So we might have patients that have never done exercise, especially in a formalized way in their life, and they don't have any experience with that. They don't have any desire to do that. Clearly, they've never engaged in it before, but maybe when we talk about movement practices, we find out that they have done dancing or they've done tennis or they've done gardening or they've done other physical activities that maybe we from a medical perspective wouldn't determine was exercise, but it was physical activity that could be woven into a program to become more realistic and lifelike and that sort of thing. So that's two foundational things that I don't think that we on average do a good enough job at. And then I think after I want to hear what you have to say on that. And then, there's some little maybe tips and tricks, quote unquote, tips and tricks that I have that I found that maybe help people be a little bit more engaged or adherent to a program.
No, I think those are probably two of the main things I would agree with you. The lack of really how do you explicitly know on the patient's expectations? What are they expecting out of you when you expecting out of treatment? What are they expecting to be the ways that they're going to navigate back to their lives? And some of those expectations may be like, well, I can really jump on board with that and move forward with that, or gosh, they want to be massaged for for an hour for twice a week for a month. That's probably not going to be something. Now again, we can refer them to some of our amazing massage therapy colleagues and say, hey, if that's part of your plan and that's where maybe that's probably going to be your better bet, those folks do it better than us, and whether I know some PTs are like, oh my God, no way, or chiros, but massage therapists are amazing with the soft tissue work. Obviously, want to refer somebody who's a little bit more up on their current pain understandings. But yeah, I think understanding the expectation explicitly, like, and asking it. I mean, we'll talk about. I'm pretty confident Jared's tips and tricks are similar to what I use in the clinic, knowing what Jared does a bit. But we'll talk about those. But yeah, I think you got to be able to explicitly know what the patient wants out of the equation. It's interesting. I mean, they're a customer, and you like. Why would you, if in any business, would you want a customer? I don't even know what you want, so I don't even know what product I'm going to provide you. You can understand that's you're kind of like, randomly hoping that things are going to line up and the equation's going to be good, where you're going to have a satisfied customer. To me, it's like, now, of course, you have to balance that with like providing good evidence-based care. I'm 100% on board with that. I think we can give a little bit more on, instead of being so rigid as clinicians on that front, and move towards more evidence-based, person-centered ways of doing it. But yeah, and then when we get into, like you spoke about, the exercise movement history, you got to have the baseline of the patient. You have to know the patient's movement baseline, their exercise baseline. If it's not even a blip on the radar for their life of exercise and stuff, it can be something that's introduced and discussed. And hey, patient, I understand, right now we're not doing a lot of movement things and different things. You want to get back to X, Y, and Z. So what are your thoughts on us getting you involved in a movement program that would help you better be able to perform those things? I know exercise hasn't traditionally been what you do, and I'm going to try to structure these to your life and fit within what you do and what you have available to you at home. Because that's another thing. You have to know, what do they do? Are they somebody who's going to the gym? Are they somebody who's going to, like, I'd rather go to the dentist and get teeth pulled than go to the gym? So knowing that baseline of a patient, and then trying to structure something where it's not this imposing, take them out of life, do something that's completely out of their character type exercise. A lot of times patients, I get people that like to garden, that people like to walk their dog, then use it as a purposeful way to start gaining some exercise. Maybe you can integrate some things within those activities that they're already doing, instead of making this, pulling it out of some, random, sterile patient, not interested in it, not part of their normal existence type activity. And it goes into a little bit of that, is just, this cognition targeted exercise, which we talk about a lot in our coaching program. Cognition targeted everything. Like, what are your thoughts on this patient? What do you think about this? Do you feel like this might be helpful for you, patient? I do that with pretty much everything I do, whether it be hands-on work, whether it be exercise, whether it be some recommendations on, maybe nutrition, sleep, different things like that we talk about regularly in the clinic. And you get a clear, explicit understanding of where the patient's at on that. Like, are they with you, or are they meh, or like, heck no? And then where you can start. Maybe it's a heck no that needs, like, God, it's not going to change unless we get you doing some things. And then if it means we have to step into some ACT or some motivational interviewing to start moving that needle, maybe to some change, or some at least considerations, and some trying some things, that then, we can become that psychologically and weaving in and out of that stuff, which I think is what we obviously speak about with our folks. But I'd like to hear. I know we've talked about your tips and tricks. I know them a bit, but I often learn new ones from you from a regular basis. But what would you tell folks what are the tips and tricks to start really helping folks understand a little bit more of that, those expectations and exercise movement history?
Well, kind of while you were talking, I jotted down 5 things, probably the main 5 things that came to my mind for uh, maybe helping to create motivation or helping to improve, adherence to a program. And the first thing that I think is pretty relevant for people and gets overlooked sometimes is that human beings like stories and human beings like anecdotes. So I like to talk to a patient about patients that I've had that are really similar to them. I never tell somebody like, hey, they were exactly like you. They were just like you. They were the same as you, because I don't believe that, for one, and I don't want to minimize a person's experience, for two. But I will tell stories about, hey, Mr. Smith, I worked with Miss Jones like a couple months ago, and she was really, really similar in presentation to you, had a lot of the same stuff going on. And this is what really worked for her, right? So when people hear success stories and they hear anecdotes and they can like resonate with somebody and they can see a process that worked for them, I think that can improve motivation and that can improve buy-in. And that is one thing, right? I think that if we engender confidence in people to say, hey, I have worked with people that are similar to you, and I know people that are similar to you that have been able to get through this. And this is kind of what they had to do. And this is the process that they went through that was really helpful for them. Like, would you be okay with trying that? Right. So that leads to the next thing is actually asking people permission. Right. This is something that Marcos Lopez like harps on all the time. And of course, a lot of other really, good clinicians talk about this is we have a tendency to tell people what they're going to do instead of asking them permission to engage in that process, right? So this is the most simple thing in the world, but it's common courtesy. B, it's respecting that this is joint and shared decision making, and C, it's a way to get people to give you the okay to do something. And when you've gotten permission to engage in an activity or exercise or to try something, then that person is on board because they're like, yeah, let's give that a try, or that sounds reasonable to me. I'm willing to give permission to try that out or to do that, right? The next thing, and this might sound a little bit goofy to some people, and it might sound a little bit simplistic, but and maybe it's culturally driven because I live in the South, right? But I will verbally ask people to engage in a contract with me on day one. I'm like, hey, Mr. Smith, we have talked about all of this sort of stuff. This is kind of what I think will really help you. This is how long I think it will take. This is what I think that the process will look like. Will you commit to working on this with me for the next 6 weeks? We're going to work together, and we're probably going to have to pivot a little bit, and things are going to go a little bit like this and a little bit like that. Will you shake hands with me and enter into like a one-on-one contract, right? So at least culturally where I live, when you give your word and you give a handshake on something, like you're like, oh crap, I've got to hold up my end of the deal because I gave my word. I engaged in this social contract, and we didn't just we made this a real thing. We bonded it with a physical act and a social expectation that I'm going to live up to my end of the deal, right? And I don't like shame people if they don't, of course, but it's the actual psychological effect of engaging into a social contract with somebody that you feel like you need to be accountable to that. And like I said, I would be interested to hear feedback from people in different societies, different social, structures, if that is totally out, in left field. But at least where I am, that's something that has been incredibly valuable, just to solidify that we're engaging in this together. And then two more things. I don't think so. A lot of times I think about exercise sequencing. And if there's an exercise that I think, or a movement that I think is incredibly important or valuable for a person that I'm not willing to necessarily negotiate too much on pulling it out, I'll usually negotiate on just about anything, adding or taking away exercises or whatever. But if there's something that I think, man, this is really valuable, really important exercise for this person, but they don't seem to like it, I put the power in their hands and say, hey, I know that you don't love that one exercise that we do. Would you rather do it now and get it out of the way? Or do you want to do everything else and kind of save it for the end? Right. So we're going to do that activity. We're going to try that out. But I'm giving you the power to say, when do you want to do it and how do you want to do it? Do you want to get past it? Do you want to save it? Do you want to do it, after you've done that exercise? So I give the patient the say in the structure of their treatment. And I'll say, hey, what's your favorite exercise, right? What's the thing that you really enjoy doing the most when you're here? You want to do that now? You want to end off with that? Hey, let's do some of that stuff that you enjoy. So they get the power to choose the sequence of their program. And then finally, I ask them, what is something that is fun? Like, what do they like to do? Like, make treatment a little bit fun. Like, if they like to dance, or if they like to play a game, or if they like to do, whatever it is, let's actually bring some fun into this, not make it so medicalized. And it's a lot easier to engage with and stay consistent and have motivation for something that you get joy out of, or you have a little bit of fun with. So those are kind of like 5 things that I think about or I hate to say tips and tricks, but just ways of interacting with people that I think maybe help, at least to some degree, improve motivation and improve adherence to a program.
Yeah, no, those are great tips and very similar to the verbal contract here in Arizona. And where I'm from in the Midwest, it's not, but I can understand Texas. That makes a lot of sense. But I kind of do it a bit because I always will have that kind of kind of recap after this. Like, is this agreeable? This is what it's going to look like? Does this sound like something you're willing to work with me on? Because I'm going to need you. We're a team. This isn't going to be. I can't do this alone. We're going to need to be equal partners in this. And I like the fact of formalizing it with a handshake. Maybe I want to try it out, see what the Arizona culture here is like. It's a pretty diverse culture because we have a lot of different, folks of many different cultural backgrounds. So it'll be interesting to see how it kind of goes. But I too would be interested to hear what folks who are listening to the podcast, maybe in your where you work and where you live, is that something that would work for you, or is that something that would just not go well? Because I think different cultures that may work well or not. But that's just like Jared said, he's understanding the context he brings and the context he lives in and works in, and trying to use that to his advantage, which I think is what you do when you're a clinician who's really trying to maximize your effectiveness with patients. The other thing I would just kind of point to, and we've kind of talked about it a bit as well, is what's the theme and the narrative of everything you're doing with the patient around exercise. I try to really just what's their why? What are the things that really, once you get them to dig down, and what's the things that make you want to get less knee pain or back pain or whatever, and you just why till they realize, I want to be able to play with my kids. I feel like I'm breaking. I'm only 40 something years old and I can't even be in the backyard with my kids. And then the narrative from that day forward is everything you start talking about with your manual therapy, with your exercise, is it's pointing them to that goal. You're reflecting that back to them, so they see that everything in the clinic is pointing them towards my why, towards what I want to get out of this thing. Now, you're not saying it every time they do every exercise, but the sessions, for me, it's like, hey, I know this is going to be getting you so your knee can tolerate to stoop down. So if we're playing in the kids in the backyard, you're going to be able to bend, squat, do the things that you mentioned that you're currently not able to do. So people can kind of see how this kind of exercise pulled out of context really can fit into the long-term context that they want to function in and be successful in. So yeah, I think that's just another thing that if you can really consistently have exercises that you can, and you should as a clinician not be just having exercises that are filling time, that they should be something that you can step back. And I tell students this who are working with me in clinic, is like, I should be able to stop you with every exercise, every manual therapy technique you do. You should be able to tie that into their goals of how it's going to move them forward. If you're just doing it for the sake of like, shoot, and we've all been there, like, I need to do something because I'm really racking my brain on what's going on here. I think and Jared and I probably still get there once in a while. But you should have a purposeful, thoughtful approach with what you're doing, and purposeful application of manual and exercise and education and those type of interventions. But no, I think those are some good things that hopefully you guys find some value in. And if you're having some issues with these type of conversations in clinic, which I know Jared and I have, and you've heard us talking in this episode about some of our clinicians who are in our coaching program. We've launched a coaching program and are continuing to have folks enroll in it. It's an open enrollment, so we're keeping it pretty small. So we have limited spots available, but it's a coaching program where Jared and I get to get into your clinical world. We've recognized that the weekend course is just not quite cutting the mustard to get somebody, because once Monday hits and that con ed instructor isn't present, and you got that difficult conversation in front of you, how do you navigate that? And some clinicians, you might be able to email them and get some feedback, but what if you had regular mentoring and coaching calls where you can get some answers and get some of those problem scenarios in the clinic handled? So that's what our coaching program, the Complete Clinician Supercharge, is all about. If you want more information, or if you're interested in seeing if it's a good fit for you, jump on modernpaincare.com/supercharged, and you can see schedule a call with Jared or Ryan. We'll talk with you and see if it's something that you think would be a good fit for you in your practice. Not everybody can jump and do a residency and a fellowship, but if you want to learn a clinical process to start navigating these difficult conversations, navigating manual therapy in a pain science world, navigating exercise with this load it or unload it or calm it down, build it up philosophies that are out there, give us a call or jump on that link and we'll be able to jump on a call with you and see if it's a good fit. Anything else you'd like to add there, Jared, before we sign off for today?
No, I think that'll wrap it up for today. I want to be respectful of everybody's time listening, but I would love to see some more people come and directly challenging themselves to improve themselves in practice like this. And it's been really great for all of the people that we've had in the program so far. And I expect that you and I are going to continue to learn and grow from it as well.
Selfishly, it's been one of the reasons, I think, just seeing what clinicians navigate in different scenarios with different thought processes. I think you can't help but learn from people as long as you come into any of those scenarios with an open mind that I don't know it all and I never will. But I think, again, it's been great just to see folks navigating their clinical processes and improving their abilities to kind of help some folks. So probably the more rewarding work I've done at Modern Pain Care so far. So excited to see it continue and excited to see more folks join us on that effort. But as Jared said, we're going to respect your time today. We really appreciate your thoughts. Definitely jump on Facebook or Instagram and let us know what you think about some of the topics we discussed today. If there are any topics you'd like to hear us discuss in the future, also let us know there, and we will see you next time.